overwhelm. Jen, you want to put up that first slide? Looks like she just got back there. Overwhelmed. How many of you have felt overwhelmed before? I think it's a common day term in our world. I feel like everybody walks around feeling overwhelmed all the time. So what exactly does that word overwhelmed mean? Well, if you break down the word and its meaning, the root part of overwhelmed is whelm, so just W-H-E-L-M, which comes from the Middle English word whelmin. This means to turn over, capsize, or turn upside down. The word capsize will become particularly relevant later on as we delve into the Bible account for today's lesson on overwhelmed. So the Oxford language defines the word capsize as to bury or drown beneath a huge mass. So feeling buried. So I'm going to engage with you guys for just a second. And anybody can throw out words. I'm not going to call on anybody. But can you tell me one word that you would use to describe how you experience being overwhelmed? Like, what does it feel like to you? Stress? Weary? Heavy? Pressure? Somebody over here? Drowning? Yeah? Anybody else? So some ones that he had listed were some of the ones you said. Drowning, sinking, anxiety, choking, fear, stuck, paralyzed, panic, and numb. But when I was doing this lesson, I found it interesting. He said that of all the times that he's done this lesson, the most profound description that he had ever heard in any of his Navigate lesson meetings was the word arthritis. Arthritis. I'm going to read this account to you. It says, "This man raised his hand and I called on him. There was a long and painful pause that I let hang there for about 15 seconds or so, but then I started to feel just as uncomfortable as everybody else, and I was about to say something like, okay, well, let's give it a few minutes to think about it and I'll come back. But before I could say anything, I could see that the word slowly was starting to form on his lips. Finally, after what I felt like an experience as painful as difficult as giving birth, out popped the word arthritis. So now there it is. It's out there, just hanging like a piñata 50 feet off the ground, and none of us can stretch our thinking far enough to connect with it. I was thinking about what I could say that would help blend his offbeat answer into that main vein of the rest of our thinking, and then it dawned on me. This guy's a genius. Well, at least his answer by design or by accident was to say at least insightful. Let's take a look at why he was so spot on as we explore some of the ways overwhelmed can manifest itself in our lives. So it's no secret to any of us that arthritis is a thief of mobility. It can slow us down and make it difficult or impossible to participate in life. In chronic cases, arthritis can all but paralyze its victims. Trying to accomplish anything can seem like too much. The lady that I clean for, she's an elderly lady. She lives here in Riverside. She was a nurse for like 60 years. Her poor little fingers are all like bent in different ways because she has arthritis. And her mobility is very limited, so that's why I go and help her. Sweet as can be. She's very independent, lives by herself, but it's definitely, it causes her to kind of be stuck in certain things where she can't do everything that she would like to do. So when we're experiencing feelings of being overwhelmed, it can also in many ways immobilize us. The arthritic characteristics of being overwhelmed affects our logical thinking, problem solving, and creativity. It can seem as though we are procrastinating, but this avoidance of challenging tasks can also be the direct result of being overwhelmed. We will often feel stuck, like we are sinking in quicksand, drowning, or buried by life instead of living it. Our cognitive decision-making is often impaired or slowed down. We may find it very difficult to make even the simplest decisions or perform mundane tasks. With this slowdown and logical flow, we will often resort to very emotional-based, impulsive decision-making and unhealthy coping behaviors. Our impulsive reactions can have a negative impact on our life, much like flailing in the quicksand, quickening our descent into feelings of stuckness and hopelessness. The gravity of our impulse on healthy decisions and behaviors compounds our already difficult situation and amplifies our feelings of hopelessness. So he gave an example. Jane is in a state of being overwhelmed and doesn't see anything in her life changing anytime soon that will better her position. She's behind on rent, needs to have a difficult conversation with her boyfriend, and her elderly mother requires more care than she can provide for her. To top it off, her son snuck out in the middle of the night last weekend and got into trouble with some of his friends. The list goes on and on. She gets home from work and knows she needs to do something. Have that hard conversation, reach out to her landlord, or maybe spend some time with her son. But she sits in her living room immobilized, unable to do anything. Jane eventually resorts to compulsive online shopping to numb herself from her overwhelmed emotions. It is a negative coping behavior that has contributed to her difficult financial position. So how often does stuff like that happen? We get so overwhelmed with things in life that instead of just dealing with them head on and dealing with the hard stuff, we learn these coping behaviors. And we end up just sitting there totally immobilized. And we're just, at that point, we're just surviving, right? We're not even living. And then oftentimes, because of these behaviors, we're causing ourselves more grief. So for instance, she's dealing with it by online shopping with money she doesn't have, and that's contributing to more difficult financial situation. So she's not dealing with it head on. You know what I thought of when I was going through this lesson was when I was younger. Does anybody remember the Fun Factory that used to be at the mall, like Humming Mall? Then it was Boardwalk Boulevard. Yeah. So they had that game called Whack-A-Mole, you know, the one where you have the mallet and the mole. At first it starts out slow. It's like one here, and you're like bop, and then one, and then you're bopping them. And then as it progresses, it's like boop, 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 and you can't even hit them all. Like you're just like, you know, and you're trying to get them all down, and they're just keep popping up. That's what it feels like to be overwhelmed. You can't get over one thing, and something else is hitting you and knocking you down. And it's just this constant whack-a-mole, and you're so exhausted because you're just sitting there just constantly going after one thing after another. So in this state of being overwhelmed, we often experience mental and physical fatigue, confusion, and anxiety. Feelings of anger and irritability are also very common. When we are overwhelmed, our judgment is often impaired, and in this compromised state, it is often difficult to judge the reality of situations. When drowning in our perceived reality, one more drop of water would be too much. Adding anything to our life is perceived as way too much. So Jen put this cup of water up here. I'm going to talk about science for a second. How many of you love science? I really liked science in school. I did all the AP classes. Our school offered a lot of AP classes so that when you went on to college, you wouldn't have to take so many credits. So I did like AP biology, AP chemistry, AP anatomy and physiology. Hard stuff, but it was interesting to me. I really liked science. So I remember in science class talking about surface tension of water. You know, when you think of water, if I had a glass of water here, I could just drop a coin and it would go right through to the bottom. But there is such a thing as surface tension on water. Have you ever filled a cup up so full and you're like, oh, it's going to spill, but then you can kind of see that like rim? It's like right at the top, and that water's just sitting there and it's not spilling out. It's because it has created what they call cohesion within the cells, and it has made like almost like a skin on top, and that is called surface tension in the water. So the surface tension of water is created by the cohesion or sticking together of water molecules. The surface tension behaves like a stretched skin due to the cohesion forces between its molecules. This property allows a phenomenon in which water can form a convex dome above a full glass. Now, you see that drop of water that's like at the top that's getting ready to hit, or maybe it did hit and it bounced? To me, that's what I visualize when you say somebody is so overwhelmed that just one more drop of water can just send them over the edge. That's what overwhelmed feels like. And so what that means to me is that one drop of water where that cohesiveness above the molecules, where they're piecing together and they're making that surface tension, one little drop can break that, and then that water's going to spill out over the edge. And that's how we feel when we're overwhelmed. Let's look at Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 41. This is a familiar story to many people. And the same day when the even was come, he saith unto them, let us pass over unto the other side. And when they had sent away the multitude, they took him even as he was in the ship, and there was also with him other little ships. And there arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship, so that it was now full. And he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow, and they awake him, and say unto him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? And he arose and rebuked the wind, and said unto the sea, Peace be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said unto them, Why are ye so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? And they feared exceedingly and said one to another, "What manner of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" So if we look at the distorted view that the disciples had in that overwhelming moment, what they believed is that their boat was sinking, that they were drowning, and that Jesus didn't care. And the reason that they had these views and they were thinking like that was because they were overwhelmed. They were overwhelmed in that moment. They, in that moment, believed that they took it on as belief that they were going to die. They were going to perish, right? But the truth of it all was that Jesus had the initial idea for them to get in the boat. He knew that the storm was coming. And as they were crossing, they were experiencing a storm, but the waves caused water. As they were crossing, they were experiencing a storm, and the waves did cause water to come into the boat, but the boat was not sinking. Okay, some water came in, but they were not sinking. The boat was not full. In fact, Jesus was sleeping peacefully in the back of the boat. If the boat was full of water, Jesus wouldn't be sleeping peacefully, right? I mean, his pillow would be waterlogged. He'd be like, I think that would wake him up. So it was not full. And Jesus did care. That was the truth of the matter. So because of their overwhelmed state of being, everything was totally distorted. So as we look at that biblical account, it's easy to see the parallels between the disciples' experience in the boat and being overwhelmed. They were in a terrifying storm. That is the truth of it. And there was some water coming into the boat. This was a situation that was totally out of their control. The evidence, when viewed through the overwhelmed lens of fear, caused them to come to the distorted conclusion that they were drowning when in fact they had only gotten a little wet. In their overwhelmed state, drowning was their reality. So it's important to note that we should never invalidate ourselves or others and what they are truly feeling. Sometimes validation is an important part of the healing process. So when someone comes to us and shares all the things that are making them feel overwhelmed, we don't want to diminish or invalidate their feelings. Okay, Pastor and I always say, your feelings are real, but they're not always true. So what you're feeling is real in that moment, but that doesn't mean you are looking at the full truth. Because when our emotions are involved, things are very distorted, okay? When we're experiencing overwhelmment, we experience life as an emotional storm, and we cannot control how much water is coming over the side of our boat, and it feels very real at the time, but our reality is distorted. So in that feeling, just one more drop of water could be too much. This is when it's good to step back for a moment, assess the situation, and not react out of emotion. If we act out of feelings during times of overwhelmment, our mechanism to deal with the water in a healthy and logical way is thrown out the window. Then in turn, we disengage and we isolate, which makes us feel more lonely, like nobody cares, and it becomes a vicious cycle. So just like the disciples, it can be hard to understand how a caring Jesus can be sleeping on our boat in the middle of a storm. But having some water in a boat does not mean or equal that Jesus does not care. So I want to add that it's a crazy notion to think that when you're in a relationship with Jesus, it means that you're never going to face any life issues. I have seen when people first come to the Lord and they think, because things do go great. When you're first saved, you're first baptized, you're feeling great, it's like a whole new world. And then life starts to hit. And then you think, oh, I thought it was going to go differently. You know, that I wasn't going to experience the same storms I did when I wasn't living for Jesus. But it's just not true. The only difference is that Jesus helps us get through those situations. You're still going to live it. So when we're in times of being overwhelmed, our thinking becomes distorted, and our rational thinking is replaced by a tornado of emotions and thoughts. We don't think clearly, and we don't see things clearly. We become confused, hopeless, and desperate. We can even become frozen in our ability to think and act logically. And then we learn how to cope and survive rather than experience a purposeful life. Statements like, I quit, this is too much, and I can't do it anymore are things we mutter under our breath or shout at the top of our lungs. I've done it before. I've become overwhelmed, and I'm like, I don't want to do it anymore. I can't. I've been there. That's just me being real. So I'm going to do a quick illustration. I need 3 volunteers. 3 volunteers. Quentin, Mike, and Sister Savage. Okay, everybody knows what binoculars are, right? Pastor's expensive binoculars. Do what? I didn't know they were on there. Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. Okay, I can see. Come over this way just a little bit, guys. Okay. So imagine that these binoculars they represent a state of being overwhelmed. Okay? I'm going to give these to Sister Savage. Now, which one of you has... Okay. Quentin, I'm going to have you hold up your sign first. Okay? Go ahead and look through the binoculars. This is overwhelmed. Can you find Quentin? What does his sign say? Oh, Pastor's going to help you with the binoculars. They're probably zoomed in because he's used to looking at deer. Still in velvet. Can you see it? Okay, so take the binoculars down once. Can you see it from here? Like, you can kind of see it, but what happens when you pull this overwhelmed?
More clear. No, it became more clear.
Right, but does it seem bigger too?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oversized.
Okay, so when she's looking through this lens of overwhelmed at problems, they become bigger. Now, flip the binoculars this way, Sister Savage. Now, Brother Mike, hold your sign up. Okay, now look at it through that end.
I can't see him. He's way off in the distance.
Way off in the distance. His sign says solutions. But looking through this lens of overwhelmed, when we turn this around, our solutions seem so far away and just so undoable. Okay, thanks, guys. This is overwhelmed. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Problems and solutions. So when we're overwhelmed, when we're looking through that lens of overwhelmed, our problems become bigger, greater, and there seems like there's no solutions. Okay? So that was what that meant. So that was a perfect illustration of how things look and feel when we're overwhelmed. This is why we should never try to make life-changing decisions that would cause us to be wrapped into addictions before we remove that overwhelmed state of being. Before we remove that lens of overwhelmed, we should never make decisions. Have you ever noticed that when you are in a season of overwhelm, the smallest things can send you over the top? When you're just frustrated, you go to the refrigerator and all you wanted was a cup of coffee or a bowl of cereal, and you pull the jug out and it's like drops. And you're like, they used the last of the milk and there's none. Or they'll put the empty jug back in the fridge and you're like, why? Just throw it away. Or how about misplacing your keys or your wallet? You're already in a pinch for time. You can't find your keys. You have to leave. You don't know where your wallet's at. Or how about getting behind a slow driver when you have to be somewhere? You're already annoyed. You're already overwhelmed. And it just becomes like this. Yeah. We experienced that yesterday when we were in a pinch to get the hibachi, and I knew the ladies would be upset if we didn't get there because they are very strict about their reservation time, and I'm like flying down 87, and I kept getting behind all these slow people, and then Teresa's follow me, and I'm like passing people. I'm like, come on, Teresa, let's go. We got places to be. By the way, that van gets up and goes. Our church van gets up and goes. Pastor didn't hear that. So all those types of minor things under normal circumstances probably wouldn't bother us a whole lot, but when we're feeling overwhelmed, those minor situations can erupt into supersized, the sky is falling type events, because that's how we feel in that moment. So how many of you have heard before the straw that broke the camel's back? I use it sometimes. That's the straw that broke the camel's back. So I am convinced that whoever penned that statement, the straw that broke the camel's back, was in a state of overwhelm. The only way that you could logically think of that would be like, if you are in a state of overwhelm, you know what it's like you're at the brink, right? That's the last straw. How many of you heard that growing up? I did before I was going to get disciplined, me and my brothers. That's the last straw. You're in big trouble. Well, the straw that broke the camel's back is an idiom that describes the final seemingly minor incident that causes a situation to become unbearable, leading to a collapse of patience, tolerance, or stability. It signifies the culmination of a series of problems, with the last one being the tipping point. This phrase originates from Arabic proverb about loading a camel beyond its capacity, where the final straw is the one that broke its back. That's the last straw as an expression that my brothers and I would routinely hear right before we were disciplined for some kind of trouble we got ourselves into. And it wasn't really the result of just that one single thing that we did. It was always the culmination of like the maxed out load of all the things that we did. When you're a parent, when you find out you're a parent, when you finally become one, and you're like, you look back and you're like, oh, my parents weren't nuts. They were just overwhelmed. And my parents were great parents. They really didn't, get onto us much. We weren't bad kids. But every once in a while, and then when you get older, you understand. Parents leave overwhelmed lives. And so once in a while, we were that straw, or we did something that was the straw that broke the camel's back. So as adults in these times, when we make our worst decisions, we are only surviving and coping. And most of the thoughts that we have in a state of being overwhelmed are unhealthy, and our coping behaviors are harmful and destructive. We become angry, we overwork, we overgame, we constantly keep busy, we overshop, we overeat, we oversleep, or we may have substance abuse. That's how we cope. So what happens is our thoughts and energy that God intended us to use for a good purpose for his kingdom, it becomes allocated to full combat mode. Instead of doing what we know we should be doing with like our energy and time, we're just surviving at that point. And what I mean by full combat mode is, for instance, we look at the disciples in the boat, okay? They weren't just sitting there like, oh, patiently waiting for God to just calm the storm. They were like probably taking buckets and trying, like, we got to get this water out of here. They're in full combat mode at that point. They're in defensive mode, right? They're overwhelmed. They didn't lay their trust in him. They were busy bailing out water. Okay, I'm going to read to you from the book here. How different would our lives be if we were traveling a little lighter? The lighter load would make it less taxing for us to navigate the ever-changing terrain that life hands us. Instead of collapsing with the addition of a few straws, we would, with the help and encouragement of God and the godly others, lean into the incline, shoulder the manageable load, and gain the elevation the trail is leading us to. This is the way to live life. He says, I've been on some 4 or 5 day backpacking trips and carried some loads that were heavier than they had to be, trudging up the mountains instead of hiking. And at the end of those adventures, I examined my pack and discovered I was carrying more weight than I really wanted to. Every backpacking trip I have taken, my pack has become lighter each time, and my enjoyment of the hike has been exponentially greater. A lot of it's figuring out what you really don't need. So I was thinking about the guys that go on the Man Up trips, and I'm sure Pastor, over the years of all his going on those trips, has realized what's really important to take and what you don't need. But if we translate that over to our life and all the loads that we're carrying, if we figure out what we really need to be carrying, what's important, and let go of some of the loads that are not important, that are just weighing us down and making us overwhelmed, we'd live a much lighter, enjoyable life, right? So what are some things that we don't need? Well, exhaustion, pain, and discomfort are great life cues that we need to lighten up. So if you're experiencing exhaustion, you're experiencing pain or discomfort, that's a good cue that you need to lighten your load a little bit. And I will go on to say that I've talked to many, many counselors that will say people that experience a lot of, and I'm not saying every physical ailment is from this, but a lot of, they have traced it back that a lot of physical ailments that we feel are actually emotional things coming out in our body. Your body gives it off. That's why sometimes when people are stressed, they'll feel it in their neck, their shoulders, because they tense up. It's a natural thing. It's not because you just went to the gym and worked out with weights. It's because you're carrying stress and your body reacts to that. So if you're experiencing those things, there might be an inclination that you need to lighten your load. So what are some examples that can end up in our examples of things that can end up in our, if you're picturing a backpack on my back? Some are necessary and some are just excess baggage, which is dead weight. So some things that we can be carrying on our backs that are healthy, and these are healthy responsibilities, are our family, our work, because we need to work, spirituality, ministry, healthy conflict resolution, meeting personal needs, and the healthy needs of our loved ones. Those are healthy responsibilities that we carry, okay? But misappropriated responsibilities, which are unhealthy ones, are things like taking responsibility for someone else's actions or lack of action. So if you have somebody in your life that is just being irresponsible, you've got to not take that on as, your responsibility, because that's extra weight and overwhelming on you. Or how about this? Taking responsibility for someone else's emotions. I've done that a lot because I'm a peacemaker. Like I want everybody to be happy. I want, but I've taken it on too much. Everybody's emotional roller coasters, I can't keep up. I'm not tall enough to ride those emotional roller coasters. Like, you ever go to the height thing and it's like you have to be 5 foot to ride this emotional roller coaster? Nope, I'm not tall enough. Like some people's, yeah, I can't. I just can't take that on. How about taking responsibility for someone else's thoughts or opinions? You just can't take that on. It's overwhelming. Attempts to control beyond our authority and ability to control, we will eventually try to control anything that we take responsibility for. And what that means is, so I did a visual so you can understand what this means. Control is the second, if the two train cars are connected, control comes behind responsibility, okay? So they're linked together, and attempts to control will always follow responsibility. So we try to control the things that we take responsibility for. Many times, this sense of responsibility will be subconscious. So just say you are, this is an example, you might hear somebody say, I'm responsible for my husband's emotions. But that same person may find themselves running themselves ragged to make him happy, trying to stay one step ahead of him, smoothing everything out, making sure the kids don't do anything to upset him. In doing so, she passes that weight onto her kids and transplants the responsibility for the emotions of others into their fragile hearts. I believe this is how I've seen many generational curses transferred to the next generation. It is essentially a projected lie, and many will carry that into every relationship in their lives. We just can't be responsible for everybody else's decisions and how they act. We can't. He gives an example here of Sally. It says, Sally takes responsibility for what people at work or school think of her. She will likely try to control their opinions by people-pleasing and becoming a chameleon rather than being herself. She will exhaust herself in these efforts and most likely become overwhelmed as she thinks, plots, plans, and assesses the success or failure of her efforts to control. So basically, she's refusing to be herself. She's either trying to be a people pleaser or a chameleon to try to tiptoe around everybody else's emotions and feelings. They're trying to control her. If you take on the responsibility of what somebody else does, you're going to allow them to control you. And that's exactly what those train cars are. So if today you've ever experienced this feeling of being overwhelmed, or maybe you're currently experiencing it, what can you do to change it? The first thing that needs to be done is to recognize what's causing that overwhelming feeling. Is it your job? Is it other people that you're connected to and their ever-changing roller coaster of emotions? Is it finances? Is it your spouse or your children? Is it maybe a newfound responsibility that you never asked to take on but you were forced to take on? Is it the emotional hurt that other people have caused you? Maybe it's a combination of all those things. Jesus said, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." So I will end by saying that Jesus is there for us, and he does want to heal us, but we have to want to do the hard work to make changes. He does not expect, he expects us. He's here for us, and he will do everything that he can. Clearly, that's what his goal is, but he expects us fully to take the steps that we need to take to make hard changes. So a couple questions I'm going to ask you, and I really want you guys to be thinking about this. Whether you're currently going through feelings of being overwhelmed or you have in the past, everybody has felt overwhelmed at some point or another. So think back to that time. If you're not going through it right now, think back to that time, because you know it's going to come again. It's just the way of life. We can try to avoid it, but things do come. But when these things happen, I want you to think of these questions and just try to apply them to your life. One is, Think of your most recent or current situation in which you were overwhelmed. What was happening in your relationships, your job, your home life, your spiritual life, your finances, or your emotions? Out of all those things that encompass about you all the time, like what was happening in those things that caused you to feel overwhelmed? Number 2, what can you unpack out of the load that you're carrying? So if you imagine yourself carrying a backpack, all the things that you're carrying around now that are overwhelming you and bothering you, what can you unpack out of that backpack? What heavy things can you unload and remove your sense of responsibility of that would lighten that load? Number 3, what are some things that you maybe can't fully get rid of? So for example, your job. You have to have a job. You have to make money. If you can't fully get rid of those things that are causing you an overwhelming feeling, what can you do to give it to God so that he can lighten your load? How can you look to him to guide you, to help you to lighten that particular load since you can't fully get rid of it? Okay. And number 4, who can you trust in your life that you can confide in to help redirect your thoughts and ideas about some of your current straws that might just break the camel's back? So who can you trust that you can go to, that you can confide in, that can maybe just help you think through things a little more clearly? Because like I said earlier, when you're overwhelmed and I showed you the problems and solutions, you're not looking at these clearly. You're looking at them through the lens of a binocular. They're either magnified or it looks like you cannot see a resolve to the end, right? So if you sometimes just go to somebody and seek guidance and help, they can redirect your thoughts into just kind of getting under control, like what in your life is causing you all this overwhelming feeling and what you can do without making hasty decisions. I've seen too many people make crazy hasty decisions because they just want out. They just want out of the situation. They want that relief, right? When you're in that overwhelmed feeling and you just want relief, it's kind of like, when you have a migraine, you have a bad headache, you just want relief. And you're taking pills and you're taking things. And I know back in the day, my dad used to get like debilitating migraines. And, he could take all the pain medicine he wanted in the world, but until he figured out what caused them, it was just like a cover-up. And some people just want to just get out from under that pain as quickly as they can, so they make these crazy, hasty decisions without really thinking through because they're not looking through the right lens. They're overwhelmed. And so sometimes it's good to just bounce things off of somebody else to get ideas. So again, if you have any questions, see me, but I hope that something in this message helped you. If you're feeling overwhelmed or have felt overwhelmed, and I guarantee you it'll hit you again at some point in your life, that overwhelming feeling, because sometimes things just happen. You ever hear that statement, things happen in like threes? It seems to be at least 3, 4, 5 things happen all at one time. And life can just get you down sometimes. So I love y'all. I hope this helps somebody today.
Amen. Well, thank you for that teaching. For all the speakers that's coming up, the importance of props. Probably for me, out of these lessons that I've heard her teach, this has been my favorite one. Not even because I'm feeling overwhelmed at this point in time, but because of the props, the illustrations. It just really brought this idea of what it means to be overwhelmed out. Right, so we should all have an idea of what to look for when we start feeling X, Y, Z in our life, and now we can visualize, man, I'm right there. One more drop and that surface tension is going to give way, or one more straw and the legs are going to buckle. And so a very vivid picture being painted of being overwhelmed. This morning I was over here in prayer, and I was meditating on people that have problems and they're struggling. And, I'm really not the most sympathetic person in the world. Sister Wright can tell you that as she lives with me, because 99.9% of the times that I've gotten past something has been when I've been on my face before God. Nobody in my corner cheering me on, but because I said, I want this and I'm going to get it, and God's going to be my strength. David lost everything he had, and his men were speaking of stoning him. Visualize the lesson now with David's men with the binoculars zooming into their problems. And when we're overwhelmed, we want to make hasty decisions and quick decisions. And in that moment of time, David said, bring me the ephod. I'm going to see what God says. And what I liked about that illustration, it kind of stuck out to me, was, with the lens of being overwhelmed, feeling overwhelmed, it magnifies the problems and it pushes your solutions all the way, far back, because when you invert the binoculars. But let's just take those lenses and says that lens is Jesus, and now I focus on the solution, and it brings it in and makes it bigger, and then I flip the lens, and then I look, and all the problems seem to be way far away when Jesus steps into the scene. And that's what she alluded to. That's what the disciples did. They're fighting the storm, overwhelmed by themselves, and finally they go and they get the right lens that says, Master, like, hello, we need you, right? And so make sure that you're looking through the right end of the binoculars at the right thing. Jesus needs to be in your viewpoint. Amen. What an awesome, tremendous illustration. That just really stuck out to me. So for whatever reason why I felt to encourage somebody that feels overwhelmed in prayer, and then she taught the way she did, be encouraged today. Lift up your eyes. Look unto the hills from whence comes your help. Amen. He's still in the boat with you. He didn't forsake you. He didn't leave you. He's still in the boat, even though it doesn't feel like it and seem like it. He's there. Amen. Elbow your neighbor and say, he's there. Let's go. Hey, we got until 11 o'clock. We're going to start at 11 o'clock. Just for Rhonda, this is how we do our service. We do, this is Life Steps. It's Sunday school teaching. All our kids are down beneath us. So now we just go over in the fellowship hall.